Hi, I'm Katie Kramer, President and CEO of the Boettcher Foundation. Welcome to Colorado Leadership Stories, where we talk to everyday, courageous leaders who have made transformational impacts in their communities and are building a better state for everyone. You'll hear from leaders and organizations and communities throughout the state as we explore the idea that leadership is an activity that anyone can do. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. Jandel Allen Davis to our show. She's the president and CEO of Craig Hospital in Denver, specializing in neurorehabilitation for spinal cord and brain injuries. Previously, Dr. Allen Davis serves as vice president at Kaiser Permanente, Colorado, overseeing government relations and community investment. With 25 years in obstetrics and gynecology, she's a leader in healthcare. Beyond her professional achievements, Dr. Allen Davis is an active community member, serving on multiple boards and expressing her creativity through art and photography. We're going to ask you about that in a few minutes for sure. Join us as we discuss Dr. Allen Davis' remarkable journey in healthcare leadership and community engagement. Welcome, Jandel. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We were just chatting before we started recording. For almost 20 years, we met in Leadership Denver. Many years ago, the Denver Metro Chamber Leadership Foundation's program. So fun. Okay. Jandel, you have described your career as a crazy ride. You were a first-generation college student who graduated from Dartmouth Medical School and practiced medicine for many years before transitioning into administrative role. What prompted that move?
There was never a time in my career, or actually, in some ways, it could even be said, as funny as this may sound, that even things that might have happened yesterday, that I am that intentional in every single move I need to make. A roundabout way of saying there was no intentionality to it. The way that I think some of the cooler opportunities avail themselves is through doing a good work in the moment that you find yourself and working alongside people who are trying to make systems or processes or places, organizations, people better and do better by them. And then somebody's always watching is what I found out. I mean, I figured out over time is that there's always somebody watching. And in fact, I know that's the case even certainly in this current role I'm in. I'm always looking for great leadership or people who've got some special skills that we could leverage in service to bigger work, or people who seem anxious and really want to be part of sitting at great tables doing work. So that's the story of the crazy ride in a nutshell. The only things I knew for sure that were I wanted to be part of my life is that I wanted to be a doctor, and I knew I wanted to be a mom and be married. So beyond those things, which are those sort of hopes and dreams kind of things, once those things, all three, thankfully happened, the rest has been this, as I described it, crazy ride of being in the right place at the right time, working hard, doing my best, and letting, frankly, as I don't know, philosophical or some way this may sound, letting the rest take care of itself, letting tomorrow take care of itself. And surprisingly, and in some cases, I'd say logically, it has. So that's how it happened. Somebody, Donna Lynn, offered me the opportunity to come work for her of Kaiser Permanente, Colorado. Didn't see that coming. Talked with my husband about that, which meant leaving my clinical practice completely aside after 25 years, having had administrative opportunities and management responsibilities sprinkled kind of heavily throughout all that time. And I'd say the same for Craig. I actually helped a recruiter identify a couple people for this role and was encouraged by a friend who texted me after and told me he wants to talk to you. He's like, talk to me. And here we are 5 years later. It's the beauty and sort of the mystery of how I suppose the universe works. That's what I'd say.
Jandel, I don't know that I know the story of, you said you always wanted to be a mom and a doctor. Why? Didn't you tell me that story growing up? Why those two specific things?
As a little kid, a little girl, like so many, I, played with the dolls and did all the things that way. And I just know the importance of family and wanted one of those. Luckily and blessedly married someone I met in college, and we've been married since 85, together since 79. And it's a funny thing that I know I wanted to, but why I think is something that's just sort of innate and primitive. I think it's a drive that many have. Not everybody does, but many think, or most thankfully do have. We do need humans to replace us as we, sort of transition to the next sphere. But I think it was that idea of being able to nurture and raise and give back to the world some cool people. And I think we've done that with Jonathan and Courtney. But also to have this thing called home that was bigger than just myself. I have this not poster, but this artist who does these wonderful, cool stick drawings and then has these little phrases on it. And the one I love the best out of his work is one that says, there are many lives I can imagine without children, but none of them have the same laughter. And I think that there's a way that selfishly my life has been enriched by being a mom. And it's kind of cool to see what they've done in terms of what sort of force multiplication they're doing in the world. So I think that's it. And it's, yeah, I just knew I always did want to.
I love that. I did too. And I still have the most wonderful mother. And I thought it would be fun. And it is. It's been one of the hardest and best things I've ever done.
Yeah, sure. The one thing I will say, and I don't want to make this a Debbie Downer, but I mean, I didn't come from a highly functional family, pretty dysfunctional, 2 alcoholic parents and a fair amount of both, but mostly emotional and verbal abuse. I'm glad that I didn't follow the typical cycle that happens. And I think that's the other reason why I wanted that kind of a family, is because I didn't grow up in it. So, yeah. And that's the most we're going to do. That's stuff for the couch.
Right.
Psychiatrist.
Absolutely.
Which I actually did. I did, honestly. And I will tell you that I spent 5 years in psychotherapy. I knew there'd come a day I'd have to deal with demons. And that's a really important thing to do. And so I think it made all the difference in terms of reconciling a lot of stuff. So,
yeah. Absolutely. You have said yes, and you are a mentor and inspiration to so many of us. And so I am curious, did you have mentors growing up? Or is there people in particular that paved the way for you or supported or encouraged you like you do for so many others?
I had a ton of role models. The funny thing about even the concept, we talk about it sort of as if it was always a thing in a big way, and the way that people thought about career development or advancement. But I will tell you, as an African-American woman, that organizational way people talk about role models wasn't something that was even talked to me about. What I would say is I saw people doing cool work, or people who supported me. And out of that grew this sort of relationship that enabled opportunity and growth to come along. So with that, by way of how I define it, it wasn't like I said, would you mentor me or would you coach me? That wasn't the way I thought about it. There were people, either, frankly, television folks who are characters, made up characters, ways that they showed up or did their work, in particular, the medical shows that were on TV, who served as models for how and what great clinical practice looked like, what great relationships in terms of the physician-patient practice looked like. Marcus Welby comes to mind, and a few others that way came to mind. From leadership perspective, there were all sorts of folks who had this way that they showed up on the public stage that served as, do that. That is the way to show great leadership, whether you're leading nations or leading schools or leading churches. There were nuns in my life who, because I went to Catholic school through 12th grade, most of the K through 12 education was in Catholic school. There were nuns who served as great models for principles and values and ethics that made sense. And then there were ones in the business and sort of healthcare community, I'd say, who took a special interest in me. And it was interesting. The older I got, and the more I sort of lived, I'm a keen study of leadership, or a student of leadership, I should say. And so in my head at any given time along this long career, I have this list in my head. It's do that and don't do that, based on what I had the chance to see people doing. And there were some people that certainly I could name who played a bigger role in that way. And in some ways, they're still in my head, even if they don't know it. And then there were, some women, I would say, who were in the public limelight that, again, I don't know them personally, but there's a way that they've been able to be effective and in turn be successful that serve as role models. Oprah Winfrey coming to mind for one. The whole notion that you don't have to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth in order to be successful or effective. In fact, those sorts of tough, non-crystal stairs, if I can quote Langston Hughes, are some of the best ways that we grow the kind of grit that's required to succeed. So it's a long way of answering the question that there's some sort of general ways and categories that people have helped influence me. And then if there was one person that I would name in my personal life who served as just this amazing role model for strength, grace, grit, beauty, toughness, what good support to people who have that special something as a little kid that you may not even know you have. It's an aunt. My mother was one of 6 kids, and one of her sisters, who actually wasn't the oldest of the 6, but just died 2 years ago at 97, has always been in my corner, was always the one since I knew I wanted to be a doctor from a young age, who was there to support me, frankly and honestly, in ways that my mother, due to a host of, I'd say, mental health issues, was not able to. What she role modeled for me was the importance in all of our lives of having those angels, those angels who can see in you or can see you the ways that you can't see yourself, can see in you the things you can't see in yourself, and are going to provide an interesting form of both conditional and unconditional love. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, it's great. Love that.
I'd mentioned in that last question about role modeling, this whole notion of coaching and mentoring, which we didn't talk about when I was, and maybe it was being talked about in different circles, but I think as a woman and an African American once out in the world and working, those weren't doors that were really open to us, if it was a concept that even was talked about. It's sort of surprising to me, and not in a bad way necessarily, but it's a fairly, I would say, modern concept, this concept of formalized mentoring. I think in the old days, like the way old days, they may have talked about it as apprenticeship. I think there's a way that this happened formally and informally and candidly, white male circles, where there's this sort of grooming that might have gone on, and in some ways was probably expected. What is interesting about those traditional models is that there was ways that those models were exclusive and not inclusive. The way I think about mentorship, I've had some folks who served as mentors, but more importantly served as sponsors for me, which is a different thing. The mentoring parts of it, and I believe it's about mentorship, is that it's really on the person who wants to be mentored, was how do you, I'm going to say use, but I don't mean it in a negative way, but how do you take full advantage of the opportunities that are availed to you when you do get to hang out with people who see potential in you, or who have open doors for you that then you walk through and you do your very best. It's really, how do you engage in those relationships? But it's really on you, the mentee, to make sure that you're getting and utilizing folks that way. With that in mind, the way I think about mentorship today is there's nothing cooler than when people who are early in their career, either I just talked to a third-year medical student yesterday, for example, who wants to be an OBGYN, at her father's urging, who's a friend, who said, would you spend some time with her? Or the younger folks who are just starting out administrative careers, or the people who send me emails and say, would you, could you? There's nothing more gratifying than that. And it's gratifying for a couple of reasons. First of all, it keeps my imposter syndrome at bay. It's like they think I have something I can teach them. Maybe I can. So I'd say that's the first thing. But the other is, I think it's a huge responsibility and accountability for those of us who've been given lots of opportunities to make sure that we are growing that next generation of leaders. It's probably one of the most important things we do, because we're not going to be here and we're not going to be on this planet forever. And there's a quote that one of my mentors actually used to show on a slide, that our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors. So when you think about it through that lens, part of that good ancestorship requires that when asked to help, it could be one conversation, it could be ongoing, it could be pulling folks along and inviting them into conversation to watch how things happen. And it can be some direct counseling, coaching, helping. And as a doctor, that just feeds my soul, because that's what I did for most of my career.
Well, I love that. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And so a little bit more there, Jandel. Were you one of 60 African-American students on a 4,000 plus student campus? Amazing. And you were talking about this, but today, even today, women of color account for a mere 5% of healthcare leadership positions in the United States. And I know that's something that you think about. And tell us how you're working to change that.
Oh, if there is a journey, I'd say two things. What is it? The journey of 10,000 miles begins with a single step. We got a lot more steps to take to get to the 10,000 mile mark. I think there's a few ways that I get to help change that. And I have the real, I'd say, responsibility, accountability to do it from this seat of privilege called a CEO and president of a healthcare organization, where we can dig in and start to really think about the workforce and are they a reflection of the communities in which we live, but also the people we serve. And candidly, there's work to do in this space. There was work to do in this space at my former employer at Kaiser Permanente, although they certainly were farther along the journey and serve as a model nationally in some ways. Back to the mentoring question, in some ways, where I had the opportunity just to role model, to use that word, just because here you are a president and a CEO, and one of the few African-American women CEOs in healthcare running hospitals, that there's something about seeing me here that is, whether we ever exchange a word or not, that's inspiring, I think, and I hope motivating to younger people of color and women of color. I also can see it in their eyes, those who I do get to connect with when they see me for the first time or I meet them, and I tell them who I am, that this smile breaks out over their face that implies reassurance, confidence, and inspiration that it's possible. When I have the chance to talk one-on-one with folks, I do it. What I have not done as well, and it's an interesting dynamic, it's an interesting place to play in or space to be in. It's an uncomfortable space, quite honestly, is to use, and I'm going to use strong language, use this platform to actually more verbally and outwardly do that work. And candidly, I think it's gotten harder in the last many years. The salvos that are waged or lobbied at people of color who are working and striving like I am in whatever way that I do to improve and open doors for folks of color and women, because frankly, if we don't do that, I think it's one of the things that's going to hurt the United States ultimately. But when you do that, as an African-American woman, I know that there's some risk in it, and I'm going to be honest about that. There's risk of being labeled, oh, she's one of them, or she's using her platform to drive her own personal agenda. And there's absolutely nothing and everything personal about making sure that there's opportunity for everybody in this country. But then it ends up taking the work down a road that can become distracting and noisy. So the way that I do it is far more quiet than you'd think. In fact, for me to say what I just said feels like a real courageous step to say publicly that when we do it, it's perceived as one way. And that's because we still don't really have the power to make the kind of change fundamentally that's needed. When white males of power and privilege do it, it's a very different thing. And I've had conversations just in the last couple of weeks with two of my dear friends who are leaders in this community and who are white and male, who are very, very much focused on equity. And thankfully, there's a lot of them in this community. And I thanked both of them. And I thank them because unless you do it, it's not going to happen. There's only so much I can get done. So that's another part of it. The other thing, though, where I could say that I've planted some flags and try to do more expended my own discretionary effort, expended our own financial efforts or money, is in pipeline development. Because the bottom line is none of this is going to change so long as there are not many women, many people of color in the pipeline. So work that I've had the privilege of sitting around alongside tables of folks doing, trying to improve our educational system and improve educational opportunity for people who've been marginalized or left behind. The work we're doing in this community to change the dialogue and change the lens of perspectives around what hiring looks like and what growing and developing a workforce looks like collectively along all other sorts of business leaders is important. I think I'd summarize by saying this last question. Oh, and I'm feeling a little verklempt. I think it's legacy work. It's legacy work. I'm 66. I hope I live a ton more years. And when I finish doing this thing called the day job, where I'm not center stage or connected to, an organization, will give me a modicum of freedom. And I hope that I have earned the reputation and I have the capital, the political and social capital, to use my voice to really, really get into this space more broadly while trying to create change from within. So who knows, some point down the line, I hope these two paths converge. This idea that how does an African-American woman of privilege who didn't come from privilege, but has been so blessed over a lifetime to do what she's got to do, how does she make change from within? And then when is that opportunity and when it is appropriate to do it from without on my own platform, whatever that may look like. And then to continue in either case to stand alongside other people of all sorts of stripes, white men and women, Black, brown men and women, folks with disabilities, folks without, folks who are from the LGBTQ community, where we can come together and really change this trajectory. And I will be, and as I said, in some ways, even now are currently in lockstep with them. But it just looks differently than, some of the more traditional ways that people are used to thinking about how we fight for our civil rights. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's a very complicated dynamic for an African-American woman to walk. And I dare say it's also generational, because my daughter would probably roll her eyes at 36 if she heard that. But her walk's been different. And her walk's been different because it's my generation who were the first generation of women who had to figure out how to make and navigate a horizon that we couldn't see, a path that wasn't there, that we had to blaze, trails we had to blaze. And it had to be done carefully enough so that the generations behind us can then take that mantle up and even make more progress in this space that sadly I think will be on forever. So,
well, I want to talk about healthcare and then Craig specifically in just a minute, but just healthcare has undergone a tremendous amount of change the last decade and continues to do so. What is the biggest challenge or biggest opportunity you see facing the healthcare industry today and in the future?
So we know all the ways in which it's broken, so I won't, sort of catalog those, but I put them under the topics of the quality of care, inconsistencies there, inconsistencies in the care experience, and the mismatch between the outcomes and the cost that it costs, that and the expense of a system that is not getting the kind of outcomes we want. And the interesting thing is, and I think you know this, but I did a TED Talk some years ago called The River of Health. Mm-hmm. And because there's this medical sociologist who tells the story of all of us downstream or someone downstream pulling out drowning people and just keeping pulling out, and finally exhausted said, who's throwing them in? Right? So we're all so downstream doing addressing what we call preventable demand, that we lack I say the will and the time and even the energy to go upstream and really deal with what's the contributors, what are the inputs to volume and the types and the severity of issues that are downstream. And that gets us into this thing called the social determinants of health. And the social determinants, yes, there absolutely are some ways that health inequities play out, but in many ways, all of us are impacted by those around education, around economic opportunity, around racism, around violence, around the built environment. Until or unless the we is not just healthcare. It's all those sectors that affect economies, affect the educational system, are dealing in appropriate and impactful ways with our inequities due to gender and ethnicity and race. Until all of us come together to start really looking at those issues, we're just going to continue to nip around the edges and really not deal with what are the inputs. The other problem, though, is that there's no money up there. All the money is in, it's how the system is set up, that we're paid for volume. And so if you decrease the volume, then how do you keep these institutions up and going? So there's a huge prevention play in there. And it's not just the go get your labs and get your mammogram stuff. It's let's get people good jobs. Mm-hmm. Let's deal with the wealth gap. Let's deal with our education system in ways that we know that we can increase graduation rates and get folks either college ready, whatever that looks like, or post-secondary ready, or work ready. So, and that's going to require some real restructuring of how we work in the public sector and in the private sector, I think. So, yeah, it's a huge undertaking, but until we face the brutal facts that we've solved the simple stuff, that we've solved most of the simple stuff in all sorts of ways. And now it's time for us to come together and really work on these hard issues collaboratively and collectively and systemically. It's going to continue to be unfortunately, a very expensive system that it is that continues to struggle with wanting to achieve better outcomes than we can. So, sorry that I don't have a better answer. That's it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a bright spot in healthcare, and that's Craig. It is, as you know, the grantee of the Boettcher Foundation. We've been so proud to be a supporter for a number of years, and just think it's incredible place. So tell the listeners about Craig and just what an incredible gem it is in our community, our state, and frankly, our country.
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that question on the heels of what I just said, because next year it'll be 40 years ago that I graduated from medical school. So I've been around this thing called healthcare for a long time. And I have never seen healthcare practice so beautifully as it is here. And back to those social determinants, what the social determinants and addressing them requires in terms of an intact, holistic healthcare system is a holistic approach to this notion of, in our case, the restoration and the continuation of a life that's been catastrophically affected by something that you didn't see coming. I mean, these are folks who woke up with one reality, I like to say, and went to bed with a very different one. And there's a comprehensive way we think about care here. And I say that Craig thinks about it through the lens of mind, body, and spirit. That's not happening in most places in healthcare. So, that's a bridge between that last conversation and this one. And I want to take a moment to thank you at the Boettcher Foundation and the folks before you who provided what we've been able to do for a number of years. Because if you think about holistic approach to who we are as people, we're way more than our physical parts. People had lives, people had jobs, people were in school, people had families, people had sports and other avocations that they wanted to do before these injuries. And our goal is to get people back to doing them, albeit differently. And so there's a holistic approach that starts with obviously they're here for neurorehabilitation and being able to safely go back into their community, then continue what has to happen with therapy. But there's also this kind of uh, innate focus on something that we don't think about daily, but tapping into resilience through the provision of hope made manifest in terms of what we can get you back on it. Bike if that's what you want. It'll be an adaptive bike. We can get you back on those horses. We want you on the horses if that was your thing. You will finish school. We can get you back to work. We can do those things. And so here it's all about using a very standardized team-based approach where the teams are ginormous in some ways because it's not just the physician, even though physician-led care, but there are therapists who bring the best of their craft. There's a psychologist, there's chaplaincy, there's therapeutic recreation, there's adaptive driving. There's all these different components that we think about what's a whole life, what's a life well lived, and how can we do it? The magic to Craig, in addition to purpose-filled employees, I mean, I am astounded at the level of love and care that people pour into this work. And it does take special people. There are folks who come and say, oh no. And God love them for the self-awareness to say, this is not a population that I can care for when I think about our nurses and our therapists, physicians. But beyond that, there is what philanthropy does and enables in terms of filling in all those other gaps that mostly are about really, I'd say, mind and spirit and all the things that insurance doesn't pay for.
You're right.
And, those challenges working with insurers, ironically, coming from me who worked for one for so long, or worked with one for so long, as those conversations get tougher and tougher, and they really are getting tougher, it's challenging for short-term acute care hospitals, let alone long-term acute care hospitals. And one thing we're hell-bent on not having happen is changing any of our approaches to being able to provide patient assistance and therapeutic recreation and adaptive, the adaptive driving, or being able, we have a machine shop, as you well know here, and have people who in rehab engineering who adapt equipment and make equipment. We've got 8, it's crazy. We have 8 3D printers down there where we're making equipment so much more cheaply and economically than we could buy it on the market. So there's this notion of patient and family centeredness that happens here in ways that I don't see it anywhere else. And we go down to new employee orientation a couple times a month, and the entire executive team, and we spend probably about 45 minutes with the folks who are there. I walk through something called the Craig recipe that Denny O'Malley, who was the CEO here for 5 years, Denny and the team back in 2004. I found it in a drawer over here with some sepia tone papers. I'm like, what is this? I've been here a few months. I went and I read through it, and it's called the Craig recipe. They finally sat down. I don't know what got into them, but they said, let's talk about what we've created here and codify it. And so I actually walk through the recipe, tell them the ingredients, talk about from that document, which we did update and add a few more ingredients to the recipe, just like all great recipes, you sort of update them. And just sort of let the teams here know, no matter who you are or what the role is you've come to do, you are an important part of what makes this place magically work, from the person at the front desk to the environmental services team to the facilities folks who keep this place so safe and so clean, to the nurses and techs who work at the bedside and are supporting people in those dark 2:00 in the morning hours when, holy crap, what happened to me? And they're scared and they're worried, to supporting families. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And I say that if all of healthcare functioned like Craig did, it would be more affordable. The care experience would be beatable and the quality outcomes unmatchable when I look at, the outcomes that we look at. And that's not just the functional outcomes. Those are obviously important in terms of what happens functionally, but also how well prepared people are when they go home and their families are. But then also those ones around school completion and return to work and the ability to leave here and go home, as opposed to needing to have a stop off at somewhere else, a skilled nursing facility, that sort of thing. So I'm proud to serve here, and I do use serve because I say I'm just overhead. I don't bring
Oh,
much money in.
yeah,
I'm
not
not
true.
billing
You're
insurers. We consider ourselves overhead. I am here to make sure that I give as much of the literal and figurative fuel to
Mhm.
these team members as I can to support them and just know that frankly I love them. And I do. I love,
Well,
like I
it's
said.
an incredible place for sure. And we've talked a lot about your leadership in the healthcare context, certainly at Craig, but I want to shift over to the community. Your community work. You are a very active participant in the Denver community on many nonprofit boards that I've seen you bless with your presence and sharing your talents and skills and your heart. But Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, Advance EDU, Museum of Nature and Science. So I'm curious what personally inspires you to give back.
That's a real easy one. It's the John Kennedy phrase, too much you've been given, much is expected. I grew up
Mm,
in a family of volunteers. My grandmother and my aunt, they were twins and they were born in 1901. Their mom died shortly thereafter. It's not clear in our records. They were maids. The two of them were maids at the Mayflower Hotel in terms of my sort of for 30 years that I knew.
mm,
Before that, they were maids in homes. I was able to find some of that through the census. They didn't have a ton of money. My grandmother had 6 kids. My father's mother and father died when he was 6 and 7. They died 2 years apart. So he was raised somewhere else, went into the military at 17. And I know that made all the difference in so many ways. 1947, he enlists.
mhm.
But my grandmother had a strong sense of community, and I got to watch that. Despite having very little money, she was a huge volunteer in the Catholic Church in the neighborhood. She was a lady of sodality. I never know what that meant, but she was a lady of sodality. She also did voter registration.
Mhm.
And there was this campaign that she was leading in the 60s, this thing, the War on Rats, where there was a real problem with, the way that trash was just thrown in alleys and a real rat infestation in poor neighborhoods. And so she's a block captain. She organized, she was an organizer that way for work that was going on. And so I had a chance to see that. My mother was a troop leader for Girl Scouts. So I just grew up in a family that was committed to community. So some of it without anybody ever saying, that's what we do. We just give back. I just feel like I've had this really privileged life with all these angels who've done so much for me and I don't even feel like it's an obligation to. I just do it because you do. And again, back to I love just hanging with people who are trying to make things better.
Mhm.
Board service is a really wonderful way to do that for institutions and community. And I think you get more out of it than you give. I can't tell you the experiences I had at Denver Botanic Gardens over 12 years. And I
Mhm.
absolutely brought in here when we're thinking about expanding, which we are, the start of a big capital expansion, but also some programmatic expansions here on the campus. And it's like, oh my God, I can't do that. And then you go, yes, you can. You did it at the Gardens, or,
Right.
being on the Federal Reserve Bank boards. Oh, I know about the economy. Well, you have the chance to learn, but you also have
Right.
the chance to contribute because there are things that we picked up along the way that we can contribute. So that volunteer service helps. And as you and I both know, you and I, because you are right there with me, Katie, we both know how much we get out of doing this stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Oh my God,
It's
it
selfish
just fills your
completely.
heart. And you meet all these really cool and wonderful people that I never would have known absent
Mhm.
service. So it
Right.
is win-win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Agree with you for sure there. So last question, then we'll do our quick lightning round. But I wanted to double back to this because one of the things I think is just so inspirational about you is that you're such an accomplished artist. On top of this, you've got this scientific mind and you're this incredible leader. And then you're an artist. I see your work on the wall at neighboring foundation office. So I was curious about that. Is that something that has art always been a part of your life, or is that sort of a later in life thing that you've come to?
Much later in life, I don't know that you know this, and this may be a surprise to you, but I will be receiving the John Madden Jr. Leadership Award from Colorado Business Committee for the arts in March.
Congratulations. No, I didn't
like,
know
how
that.
that
That's
happened?
wonderful.
How did that happen? Unbelievable. I was one of those kids who thought I can't do art, and I
Mhm.
came to it late. I came through it through quilting, and it's a long
Right.
story.
Hmm.
I'm happy actually, just because it was kind of fun. To share my nomination with you. We had to like self-nominate, which was kind of, oh, Kristen said, please nominate yourself. People have nominated you, but no one knows an artist's work as well as the artist. So
Right, of
it
course.
was really cool to sit down and like really think about how this happened. But I started making quilts in 1989. And then due to a wonderful sort of collision that happened at a retreat in 1998, where someone told me you're an artist based on how I answered a question she asked me, I went home and just jumped in and started thinking about manipulating fabric differently. And it's become this thing. Who knew? All that was in there. And I call it quilting outside the lines, that thing that you see
Hmm.
behind me. But I've also now I do these really interesting pen and ink drawings. I've done some sculptural things. I'm just having a blast with it. And the beauty, I think what one of the reasons this, I love the opportunity to do this is because art waits for you. I'm privileged to say that, I don't have a deadline most of the time to get anything done. I used to say quilts don't get fetal distress in the middle of the night and need a C-section.
Right.
It is something that I do for myself. So, I mean, it's something that the art part of my life is something that I get to do for myself in some ways. It's the part that, when I get to it, I get to it. When I'm inspired or moved to do something, I do. It's the one part of how we get to live that's not pressured until there's something that I'm committed to doing. And even then, it's still a fun thing to do. So, I've made well over 100 pieces of something. And plus, trust me, there's not 100 pieces of stuff in my house. It's all over the place. I love giving it to nonprofits for galas and for,
Hmm.
that sort of thing, or just gifts for people. I've done some commission pieces, which just surprises me. But it brings me great joy to be
I
able to do
love
it.
that.
It's even weird to own the
This
title artist.
artist. I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
And so not totally untrained, and just it's the wonderful opportunity to ask what if questions. What if I did X, Y, Z?
Hmm.
And I bring that creativity into work, into
Hmm.
to the leadership. So
That's
it's
great.
cool to have both sides of your brain light up.
Well, to finish us up today, I've got just your lightning round questions, four of them.
Okay.
So, Jandel, what's your favorite Colorado hobby?
Hiking, being outside.
Hmm.
I say I'd live outside if I could have my kitchen and my makeup drawer and my shower. And then someone said that's called camping.
Oh, yeah. That's funny.
So hiking, yeah.
Yes, of course. Oh, I love it too. What's your favorite Colorado landmark?
I was trying to think about that. It's not a landmark, I'm sorry, but it's a place, and it's Telluride. I
Mm,
think Telluride, Colorado is the most beautiful place on earth.
yep.
I just love it. So maybe there's some landmark down there, but I don't have, something that's been man-made that strikes me. I can answer from the cultural perspective. I think Denver Botanic Gardens is one of the most magical places in town. So
Oh, it certainly is. Yes,
yeah.
it certainly is. What action hero do you most identify with?
I had no answer for this because I don't know of any. But I think when I think about how I practiced medicine, and even how I told some people the other day, I view the hospital as my patient. The hospital
Mm,
is my patient, along with the team members here. We're mostly not ill, but so it's just about health and well-being and holding things together. But there are those times where you have to rush in, and where you are, what's the highest and best use of your time. So I guess it's going to sound funny, but I guess it would be Superman, not
yeah,
woman. Superman. It's
yeah.
those things that only you can do. And
Hmm.
luckily, mostly you're not needed most of the time. So it's just those unique times where you bring
Hmm.
whatever that special thing that Superman brings. And always wear your Kevlar when you
Yeah.
go, or whatever when you go into those. Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, what are you currently binging? Like a show or a book or a podcast are you reading or listening to right now?
This one will blow you away. I am watching Billions.
Hmm.
Oh God. Oh, it's something. Billions. Do you know that one?
No, I haven't seen
Oh,
that yet.
it's on
Netflix,
anyway,
right? Where is
I
it?
forget where it is, but I have it on Amazon Prime,
Oh,
and it's about this. It's the darker side of power. It's the
mhm.
darker side of greed. And again, back to I got that list of leadership things you do and don't do. It's fascinating to watch this, and partly I think I love it because I was a sociology major in college, and the behavior of groups and individuals always fascinates me. So I'm watching this Billions. It's really dark and kind of scary, creepy in terms of how business can work or not.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for taking some time and visiting with us here, and appreciate it. Thank you for joining Colorado Leadership Stories, where we hope to inspire the next generation of Colorado community builders, doers, and difference makers. Colorado Leadership Stories is presented by the Boettcher Foundation. The Boettcher Foundation supports Colorado by empowering leaders and communities with tools to tackle challenges and pursue opportunities, building a better state for everyone. With an 85-plus year legacy of giving back, we're committed to amplifying our impact for future generations. That's the spirit of Boettcher.